Morning, Paul. Just curious your thoughts on Logan Stanley's play last night, coming back in for the first time
Yeah,
since mid-February.
it was good. That's a long stretch to be out of hockey, especially when you're new to the level. And so he did a bunch of things that we'd seen in the past that we liked. There's always going to be room for growth when you're talking about a young defenseman, especially, I guess. But he was solid.
Go next to Scott Billick from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Paul, and this isn't an indictment on your team, but just something that happens across the league. But how difficult, or what makes it so difficult to defend the slot in hockey? Cal Connor talked about playing man-to-man. So if you lure a guy one way and you lose that guy, it opens up opportunities. I mean, what makes it so difficult to kind of defend such a small area of the ice in the grand scheme?
There's a whole bunch of different ways that the puck can get to your net from that area. I think your opponent has something to do with it, right? Like the teams that generate a lot of, there are teams that generate a lot of slot shots that you never consider particularly dangerous, and those are just on the outside, poor angle, and the rebound doesn't happen. What you don't like are the slot shots that you don't control. And every team has strengths and weaknesses. There are teams that do a really, really good job of controlling that slot, but they don't win a lot of games. And then there are teams that win on that alone, right? So you take a look at what your group is, what you're good at, where you excel. For us, that's a challenge for us, right? We have known that for a while. The advantage as strengths and weaknesses is that we'll score some goals without having a tremendous number of slot sets. So when you look at the offense that we do produce, it's not from throwing pucks to the net all the time. But there are teams that do that. So we got more risk in our game than other teams possibly. And we're trying to get that right balance in to give our goalies a chance to be as good as they are.
We'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Paul, is it safe to assume that Toronto is one of those teams, just given how many quality high danger chances they have and how many goals? And you commented yesterday about that area of the ice, the slot. Is Toronto making a living this year on generating those high quality chances?
Yeah, I think that's been part of, they do a real good job of creating a problem for you before the puck gets to the slot. So you look at a lot of the one-on-one play that happens down low, and we want to have layers in that, right? We don't want to be man-to-man in the corners. Where a guy can spin out, but they make those plays, right? Some of them, there's a skill to it. But the other piece to that, there's a real willingness on that team now that maybe you didn't see in years past, to be at the net, have a net front presence, a guy taking a beating in the net, holds a D, turns it into a 4-on-4 game, which they really excel at. So we would look at our fault or our areas that we got to get better at, but they're very, very strong with that for sure.
We'll go next to Sarah Lesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Paul. Just how will you approach today? Is it an optional practice? I think most usually are at this time of year for you, but and are you expecting it to be a well-attended?
Yeah, we will look very, very, so it's not really even an optional. You got to kind of beg to get out there today. You have to make a good case for yourself to be on the ice. You know what, Sarah, in truth, we're learning how to do this. This is a whole different deal. Like, I would much rather have the team standing outside in the sun for an hour than on the ice for an hour. We've been in our hotel and we've been in the rink, exclusively. So we're trying to find different ways to recover mentally and physically with the schedule that we have. Today, we just thought, you get around to the players in the morning at breakfast and see how everybody's doing. We didn't think we'd get anything done by putting them on the ice today. So we put a few guys out, make sure that LB's staying sharp, and then try to come back with some energy tomorrow.
We'll go back to Scott Billick from the Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, Paul, I'm going to harp on the high danger again, but you just said there, this is something you've been working on for the past couple of years. Why is that a difficult mentality maybe to change within a team to defend them or to create them? Or and maybe that's the wrong word, so correct me, but why is it hard to get a team to kind of do what you want them to do in terms of the high danger shots?
No, it doesn't work like that. We can eliminate the high danger shots. We'll just stick 5 guys in the slot. We'll never put any pressure on the puck, and we'll spend about 45 minutes in our end, and they'll just be bombing them from the outside. And so we feel that pressure is a really important part of our game. Let me just answer it a different way. Every team is structured a certain way. That's going to be our challenge. And it's not a matter of players not wanting to do it. It'd be just like, this will be a bit of a poor analogy, but it'd be like telling a guy that really wants to score goals, just go out and score, right? We really want to defend that area. It's not in our, we're not necessarily built to be really great in that department, but we can be good in it, right? When you look at that back end that we had last year with all those injuries, we still ended up 10th in goals against. So yeah, those numbers aren't great. They are also not the holy grail of hockey, even though we've decided to make them that. We've been exposed in our slot in the last 2 games at a higher level than probably the one other game this year, and not for the entire night. Certainly the second half of the second period last night, it happened a whole bunch of times. And then late in the third, it happened again for us. It's our thing that we got to work on. That's our challenge.
We'll go back to Sarah Lesky from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Just following up, Paul, when you said that this is kind of a learning experience for everybody as to how to approach this, have you spoken to any other coaches, maybe with some of the guys down south that you're close with, just about how they're approaching it and run different ideas? All
kinds of things, right? Talk to other guys that are going through it. It's a little different animal because most of the guys I've connected with are in the south. Then, scour the internet for what other pro teams are trying to do with this. But there's not a lot of information out there because this is kind of unique in Canada, right? We're still really quarantined in how we move. Our buildings are completely empty. So this is brand new for all this. And then our schedule's really unusual this March, right? We're basically going to go, be gone for 11 and really only come home for 3 days, but you play 2 games in those 3 days because we fly out after the second game and then go out for 14 more. So this is we've got this on our priority list as something that we really need to look at, and we're trying to address, and we're trying to learn on the fly, and we're trying to find ways that we can get these guys to almost mentally recover. The physical part's going to be a challenge as it is, but because we're going to spend basically the month of March on the road quarantined, what can we do to kind of keep them mentally fresh? That's what we're fighting for.
We'll go back to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Paul, we know that this is a results-based business. And so if you look at the last 2 results you've had against the Maple Leafs, you have a win in regulation, you have a point in your overtime loss last game. When we talk about kind of adjusting, this is your challenge, right? To limit those chances that you've seen in the last 2 games. If I'm reading between the lines correctly, is it a balance between doing what you guys do better and adjusting to what they do well, and trying to find that balance of not trying to prepare for them and still trying to instill?
I get what you're saying, right? I thought early in game 2 we were much better at trying to control that slot area. I thought in the first game we spent far too much time worrying about pressuring pucks that we really couldn't pressure, so we would accept a little bit. But I also thought that got away from us last night. I thought we did it well for a while. I think they played an outstanding game. When you go through the video and you start watching and you find yourself watching the other team more, that's usually a tell that there's something there that you really like. Toronto was really good. Their gap was outstanding. They create a lot of loose pucks. I mean, they played to their strengths, and our goaltender had to be fantastic. That happens, right? And we're taking that point. We went into San Jose and won a game last year on 52 shots, and we went into Vegas the next night and won a real big game. So yeah, I don't think that these 2 games are necessarily our team at its best. I think that yesterday we saw the Toronto Maple Leafs be roller coaster chip in here. I think in some ways because of that trip to the game in Montreal, but you know, you're 2-1-1 on a road against 500 plus team. That's all right.
Just a couple more for Coach. We'll go back to Scott Billick. Go ahead, Scott.
Paul, Connor Hellebuyck's play has been outstanding in the last couple games, and often is. Do you have to ward off? I don't know what you would call it. Given how good he is, given how you can make a mistake and he can make up for it, do you have to ward off at all players kind of leaning on that at all, or is that something that you would?
Yeah, so I think just sorry to interrupt. The idea that we would play casually and just run and gun because our goalie will stop the puck, that's not real, right? So that's Charlie Huddy's favorite line. Paul Coffey used to skate by Grant Fuhr before the puck drop and say, "I'll see you at the end of the game." That's got nothing to do with what we're doing. Like we go into that Montreal, I think, game we're 8th in goals against. Like there's been a lot of really good work that's gone into our defensive game. It's the last 3 hasn't been a great example of it. This is maybe a really good idea, you know. So as coaches, we would be very aware of all of these things that you're talking about, right? We would understand that this is an issue. And I'm going to answer your questions and maybe give you the impression possibly that it's not a concern, but I'm staying off this roller coaster because there's going to be something else. In 2 weeks, it'll be your penalty kill or your power play or something. There'll be a piece. But at 2-1-1, we've got an area game that we're constantly trying to work on. And that's what the regular season is all about.
And final question, Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I wanted to ask you this question a few days ago. I'm not sure if anybody has since, but when you look at Toronto, I saw a funny picture. It had John Tavares, Joe Thornton, and Jason Spezza sitting on the bench together in a picture saying, no one would have imagined, 10 years ago, if you said these 3 guys were on the same team, they wouldn't be. And I know you always want to add veterans to your team, experienced players to your team. And in most parts, when you have a culture, you have an identity within your team, you usually add complementary pieces. That's certainly been the case here in Winnipeg, where you have your core. When you add players like Jason Spezza, Wayne Simmons, Joe Thornton, guys who have credibility in this league and a lot of experience, what do you think that's done for Toronto? And I know, understanding you're not in that room.
Okay, it's a good question. What's interesting about it is all of those players, when they first came in, with the exception of Wayne Simmons, but those other 3 guys are like offensive guys, right? And they're putting up numbers. And I'm not saying their defense is questionable. I'm just saying that all of them learned to become great pros and play the right way. And so you're not bringing in just a 35, 40-year-old guy. You're bringing in a name that all of these players have watched score a bunch of goals. Like if you think about, Mitch Marner and these guys were like 10 years old watching these guys play in the NHL. They come to the team, but they're not cheating the game, right? They're playing the game hard. And part of that is they're older and they've learned that. I'm not saying they were like that when they were 20, but in their later years of their career, they're not cheating. They're not blowing the zone. They're not back checking hard. They'll block shots, they'll battle, they'll do all those hard things that they've learned over their career that it takes to be a great pro. So they've brought in some wonderful mentors for that group. And I think you see it in their game. I mean, you see those players, like their first goal, you've got 2 really skilled guys battling that front, right? They're not playing on the perimeter. They're down there, Matthews and Marner, and they're right in the dark areas net front. So I think it's had a real positive impact to the team.